Well, we're just coming off the four horsemen from last week, pillaging, rampaging, bringing war and destruction on the earth. And now we see some of the aftermath in the fifth and sixth seal, the saints who become the martyrs and the witnesses, what it really means to be a witness for God, crying out for the Lord, and continuing to see what kind of judgment, devastation, and justice is being brought on the earth. Let's go. Revelation 6, 9 through 17. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar those who had been slaughtered on account of the word of God and the witness they had given. They cried out with a loud voice, "Holy and true Master, how long will we wait before you pass judgment? How long before you require justice for our blood, which was shed by those who live on earth?" Each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to rest a little longer, until their fellow servants and brothers and sisters, who were about to be killed as they were finished. I looked on as he opened the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as funeral clothing. The entire moon turned red as blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its fruit when shaken by a strong wind. The sky disappeared like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. When the kings of the earth, the officials and the generals, the rich and powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in caves and in rocks of the mountains, they called to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the Lamb's wrath. The great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" So let's take it one seal at a time. We got the fifth and sixth seal here. And one, I think this directly connects with what we just saw last week. The four horsemen unleashing this devastation, war, violence on the earth. And that kind of violence in the Old Testament is, on one hand, an act of judgment against the wicked, but it's also an act of purification toward God's people who have maybe rebelled against him, and this is a way of him correcting them and bringing them back. And you see this here. The connection here is in the wake of those four horsemen, some of the Christians have indeed been killed. So they are a part of the slaughter. The difference, though, is why they were killed and the meaning behind it. So they were killed where the wicked might be killed because of their rebellion and their injustice and sin. These are killed because of the word of God and the witness that they had given. There's a few really cool takeaways from this for me. One, that word witness is the word martyros in Greek, and that's where we get the word martyr. Actually, the original word was martyr. It turned into the word witness because one of the primary ways the early Christians were the ultimate witness of their faith and their devotion to God was that they were killed. And so it became like a synonym. The way you became a witness was by being a martyr. That's like the ultimate act of witness, to bear testimony all the way to the point of death. And there's something kind of theologically significant here. It's those that had given their life for the gospel, those who had given their life for the word of God, are transported right into the throne room, and they have this place to stand on and intercede before God, and God hears them and God answers them. So this idea that as we suffer, not just any old suffering, not suffering for our own sin and our own rebellion, but as we suffer for the word of God, as we witness God, and in righteousness we actually suffer, we have a place to stand before God's throne and intercede for ourselves, for our family, for others. There's one cool connection. I only have time to just briefly mention it, but in the book of Job, 42:10 is one of the most powerful verses of the whole book. But you have this Job, who's this righteous, blameless person suffering unjustly. And right at the end of the book, he is put in the position where he is able to intercede for the nations. His four friends, who are all coming from different nationalities. So really there's this sense that they have erred and they have described God wrongly. And Job is the one who is called upon out of his suffering to intercede for the nations. I just see an interesting thread here. There's a lot more we could say about that. But this idea that as you suffer, maybe to the point of death, but even in life, as you suffer because of your faith, you have a place to stand to cry out to God, and he listens and he responds. I really like that. Let's get into the sixth seal. This is where some of the crazy images of Revelation shows up again, but you got the sun turning black, the moon turning to blood, the stars falling from the sky itself being rolled up like a scroll, the islands moved from its place. one, I want to stress this is not to be taken literally. This is not a code for what actually is going to happen. We're not looking for a blood moon or something like that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, if you try to read this literally, it doesn't really make sense. The scroll, the sky disappearing, being rolled up like a scroll, that's an image of the actual destruction of the world, right? Of the planet itself. But the very next line, clearly the planet has not been destroyed. This hasn't actually happened in real time. This is not that kind of report. This is a symbol of the catastrophic nature. Really, this is giving us a heavenly symbol to understand what God is doing in real time on the earth. Another way to actually bring this home really clear, there's several references. I'm going to put this in the show notes, but the biggest one is probably Isaiah 34, 1 through 4. Here, I actually have this right here really quick. So it says, "Draw near, O nations, to hear, and listen, O peoples. Let the earth and all that is in it hear, and the world and all that springs from it. For the Lord's indignation is against all the nations, and his wrath against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to slaughter. So their slain will be thrown out, and their corpses will give off stench, and the mountains will be drenched with their blood." And here it is. "And the host of the heaven will wear away. The sky will be rolled up like a scroll. All their hosts will wither away, as the leaf withers from the vine, or as one withers from the fig tree." That's a clear allusion to this, the stars falling, all of that. So what God is describing in Isaiah, in the prophets, and here is the judgment on the nations. God is angry at the wickedness of the world, and he's bringing judgment. And the only way to describe that kind of wrath is through this otherworldly language. Really, this is a symbol. This is the heavenly significance. We would say when such catastrophe happens today, it was like the sky was falling, right? But we're not supposed to actually believe that the sky is literally falling from its place, but that's a metaphor for us to understand just how cataclysmic whatever that event was. And so the judgment on the nations looks like this, or it can be described like this. The other very possible point of all of this is that the stars in Isaiah, that passage I read, is called the hosts of heaven. And for the ancient world, their idea of the cosmos, the stars themselves were like heavenly powers, heavenly beings. And so there's this sense that there's there's a heavenly battle coinciding with the judgment on the earth. And so as it's not just humans battling it out and God orchestrating his judgment, God's bringing judgment across the board. The heavenly battle coincides with what's happening here on earth. And so there's this sense in Isaiah, in the prophets here, that as God is enacting justice against the nations on the earth, there's an equal battle happening in the heavenly places. We talked about how the 7 letters to the 7 churches each had an angel, like this idea that there's this guardian angel watching out for the people of God. Well, there's evil heavenly beings as well. And so God is bringing his full justice in the whole realm of creation. And the heavenly beings are being judged right alongside their earthly counterparts. And so there's a lot going on here, to be sure. But all of this is this intense symbol, metaphor to describe the kind of justice and judgment being brought out on both the earth and the heavens.